Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session of the 2025 First Responder and Veterans Wellbeing Summit. My name's Donna, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors for Wellbeing Australia. I'll be your host here today. It's wonderful to have you all with us. Thank you for joining, and this promises to be a very valuable and insightful session with our wonderful speaker this morning, Shane. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who might be online today. We recognise your deep connection to land, water, culture, and what we'll be discussing today, importantly, community. And we honour your contribution across generations. So a couple of quick notes before I hand over to Shane this morning is today's session is being recorded and will be made available on our websites, either the Wellbeing Australia website or the First Responder Wellbeing Summit website in the coming days. We've also, Shane may have time at the end to take some questions. So if you do have a burning question you'd like to ask Shane this morning, please put it in the Q&A section at the bottom, and we'll tee those up for Shane to answer if time permitting. We'd also love your feedback. So at the end of the summit today, or the session today, there'll be a very brief 1 to 2 minute questionnaire. If you wouldn't mind, please taking the time to complete that. We really value your feedback and just helps us understand what you want more of and how to improve. Also, we have developed some free wellbeing resources designed specifically for you, and these will be sent to your inbox in the coming weeks. So please add us as a sender to your address book so that those don't land up in your junk folder. Wonderful. Well, it is my honor to welcome our keynote speaker this morning, Shane Fitzsimmons. Shane is, as you would all very well know, a highly respected leader with a lifelong commitment to public safety and community wellbeing. Shane's led some of Australia's most high-profile emergency organisations throughout his career. And today, Shane's talking about a really important topic at the heart of the summit: how we rediscover our identity, our connection, and our purpose when the uniform comes off. Beyond the role reflects on life's transitions, agency responsibility, and how service can evolve, not end after active duty. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Shane. Shane, over to you.
Good morning, Donna, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's an absolute privilege, and I thank yourself and Catherine for the opportunity of being an ambassador for Wellbeing Australia, a cause dear to my heart, where we focus on those throughout our sector, the wellbeing and the good health, given the challenges that we all find ourselves confronting. Can I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I meet? I'm up on the northern outskirts of Sydney, on the land of the Guringai, part of the Darug Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, both men and women alike. What a wonderful topic and a wonderful initiative of wellbeing to undertake this forum. And I have observed for a long time and processed my thoughts and indeed more latterly my reflections on just how much it means to people to belong to something, to be a part of something. And I know myself, being part of the Fire and Emergency Services fraternity, principally through my volunteer and salaried roles in the Rural Fire Service for over 35 years, I very much understand that attachment, that belonging, and indeed, dare I say it, it becomes somewhat of a way of life. We wake up every day, we're contributing, we're participating, we have roles, we have responsibilities, and we're doing our bit as part of a pretty significant team, no matter the scale of that, that's there for purpose, that's there for service. And there's something that makes you feel pretty special and a sense of accomplishment and achievement when you find that place of belonging and purpose. I know particularly when I reflect on some of the challenges over years gone by, where we found real challenges. And what I'm talking about here is how strong that sense of connection and how strong for some people that sense of identity and belonging really comes. And I remember a couple of decades ago, we were working through some real challenges in the organization where we had very senior, remarkable individuals that were holding volunteer senior leadership roles for many, many years. And we had this impasse where young people were coming through. They had aspirations of looking towards these senior roles. But as they used to say, the old guys just aren't giving it up. And when we started to unpack that, I remember spending time with those old guys in inverted commas, and they would often say to me, "Oh, Shane, the young ones just aren't ready to take on these leadership roles. So we're holding forward, and we're still going to deliver our efforts through our various roles." And interestingly, quite a number of these people held numerous roles. I remember a colleague of mine at the time really started to unpack this in our organisation. And we found with the deep dive, when we start talking to people at a very human level, we found that many of them found their volunteering role, the wearing of the uniform, the issuance of all those responsibilities and activities that they undertook in support of others throughout that community, was very much a part of their personal and social identity, their social or community standing. So that uniform, that role, that rank on their shoulders, for many, that really meant something. So we found ourselves really challenged with this impasse of how do we free up these senior roles to allow the next generation of leadership to come through. And we introduced what we called a volunteer group officer program where senior volunteers reaching a stage in their life where they didn't want deep down the burden and the responsibility of full operational command roles, but they really found an attachment to the identity, the uniform, and the purpose for which they held that standing in their local community. And we introduced we introduced a retired group officers program. And basically, in essence, as group officers and senior volunteers were elected to roles, there was also this provision now where a senior volunteer, with the support of their membership, could be voted in to the retired group officer category. And what that meant in unpacking this issue was two very distinct outcomes. Number one, we valued very much the remarkable experience, insights, skills, and knowledge that these individuals had. And by putting them into the retired group officer program, we didn't lose them. We didn't lose all that capital within the organization. But importantly, for the individual, we made the provision that they would still retain a uniform, they would still retain a rank and an acknowledgement of their mentoring role, their ability to do a sidestep out of the core operational elements and continue to deliver support and assistance and mentoring and guidance, and recognise their standing or maintain that standing in their local community. Of course, the other outcome, which was very positive, was that it freed up opportunities for the new and emerging talent of leaders and operational commanders to come through and take up those operational roles. So at a very meaningful part of my journey through an organisation, I really started to understand how deep-seated this sense of belonging, this sense of purpose, this sense of attachment really is for many people when it comes to an organisation, the wearing of uniform, a standing in that organisation and or the community. The the other aspect where I found um, experiences and insights for those that were leaving key roles in defence, in policing, in other paid and salaried environments of fire and emergency service or public safety agencies, was when I would get to talk to many of these retiring or departing personnel from different organisations, and they were taking up volunteer roles in organisations like the Royal Fire Service, SES, and others, where they could contribute those lifelong skills back into the community. But for many, as they made the transition and started to adjust, they saw promise, they saw opportunity in pursuing a salaried role in an organisation like the Rural Fire Service. And when I would talk to them individually or collectively, depending on where we were, I was pretty buoyed by the idea that these remarkable people would be interested in pursuing another chapter of their career as an employee with our organisation. So obviously, I encouraged them to get on board and go through the application processes when they were available. But what we found, and I found particularly, I was in a deputy or an assistant commissioner role at the time, and I was looking after regional management. I was looking after operations where we were really keen to see people be injected into the salaried ranks, both centrally in the head office environment, but also right across a dispersed geographic area of the state of New South Wales. And what I found was too often, so many of these people were applying for roles and they weren't even getting to the interview stage. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And then with the team, we started to unpack what the applications looked like, why they weren't getting through assessment panels and onto the offering of an interview, let alone being successful in a role. And what we found was when people make transitions, particularly from, in my example, the non-public sector environment, if they're coming out of defence or they're coming out of private industry or they're coming out of other organisations, the application process at that time was pretty strict. It was very process driven. There was a formula that the selectors were following, and yes, there was some guidelines to new applicants out there in the marketplace. But unless you were really attuned to the criticality of those guidelines almost being prescriptive, what we found was people were putting applications in together that they might be a brief cover letter and they'd have this remarkable resume attached. But back then, they might list 6, 7, 8 essential criteria. And if you didn't break down that essential criteria subject by subject and put your paragraph or 2 or 3 against every one of those criterias, the panel weren't able to tick off an obvious correlation with the essential criteria. I remember an example was so ridiculous that one of the essential criterias was something like a driver's license or a heavy vehicle driver's license. And we had people in their resumes that identified, that they were heavy vehicle driving instructors and they had lots of experience, but they didn't list in their application that they had the heavy vehicle driver's license. So they were deemed not to be complying with all the essential criteria. So we just found the lunacy of this was not only depriving us of some remarkable individuals to come into the fold and be part of the team, but the deflation, the psychological, the moral impact on people that are putting in the effort and having a crack at applying was heartbreaking. And it was really, really demoralizing and setting people back, because what it said was, not only was I struggling with the idea of, once I leave X, am I going to be of any value to anybody else? Well, when they have a good go at having an application submitted, they were finding that they weren't even getting past phase 1. We introduced what we called a volunteer to career day, volunteer to career program, where particularly throughout the volunteers, we had our human resources area and some of our regional people. We offered weekend programs, weekend workshops. I think they were a one-day workshop or a half-day workshop or something. But essentially what we did, we advertised out there that people that were members that were interested in converting their volunteer interests into a career opportunity into the service, come to a workshop and we'll actually take you through the process of how applications and recruitment work in the public sector in the Rural Fire Service. And we found remarkable attendance, and surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I should say, and not surprisingly, we found when people had been through that process, they were then writing applications and they were getting past that critical hurdle will you be called in for an interview process? And hey presto, when they've got a chance to speak and talk about their experience and talk about their value and their offering for the organisation, we saw a dramatic shift in the success of applicants getting through to either full-time roles or being put on eligibility lists because they were worthy of merit, but they might have been pipped by another candidate at the day, and they had opportunities for movement into other vacancies should they come up. So things like that really reinforce for me that we've got to do more as receiving or recipient organisations, but we've also got to do more as organisations where our teams are leading us. I know from my personal experience, particularly when I'd been in the Rural Fire Service at the time for over 35 years as a volunteer and a salaried member, and a lot of people didn't realise, but leading into 2019, I'd had discussions with the government and some of my senior executive, and I'd formed the view that I'd been commissioner of the organisation for over 10 years. And I thought any organisation, any individual, there comes a point in time where change is beneficial, both personally and professionally. And I signalled to the government that I thought it was about time that I should step down as the commissioner and pursue other interests. I had no idea what that was going to be, and I thought it was an opportunity for the organisation to look to some renewal as well. Well, as it turned out, I was going to leave in the August of 2019, but the senses were such that we were shaping up for a difficult fire season. And I spoke to the government and said I didn't think the timing was right, but I would stay for the fire season and we'd work through to the other side. Well, clearly we had no idea how bad or how awful that fire season would be. And to this day, I'm very grateful for staying and being part of the team through our most awful of seasons on record, but being part of a team that I'd grown up with, that I was attached to, that I was very fond of, and working through those difficult times, no matter how stressful and no matter how draining they were. And I accepted a role offered by the government at the end of that fire season to take up a new organisation in the name of Resilience New South Wales, centred on disaster recovery, given the magnitude and scale of what was required. And I found the transition not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And I think there were some material reasons for that. Number one, it was still very closely aligned to the operating environment, the public safety space that I was very accustomed to. I was still very strongly connected and interwoven into the fire and emergency services structures of the state and the Commonwealth. We were leading unparalleled recovery operations. And of course, we were transitioning from fire straight into flood, COVID, and all that came with the record-breaking natural disasters and other incidences that we were struggling with as a jurisdiction and as a nation. So extremely busy working through. I would joke often about the challenges of one day I was very disciplined and very structured, that I would get up every morning, not need to make a decision when it came to getting dressed because it was the same uniform every day. And whether that was 5 days a week, 7 days a week, I didn't have to think about what I was wearing, except for when we were all messaging each other about the ceremonial standards. Was it tie, no tie, tunic, no tunic, medals, ribbons? Was it, all those sorts of things. My wife used to say to me, crikeys, you wear a uniform and you still can't work out between you what you're going to wear to every event. But there was a discipline. There was a uniform every day. And I remember the little things when I moved from a uniform organisation into a non-uniformed organisation. I found the whole struggle around, the little things like what suit matches what shirt matches what tie. When do I or don't I wear a tie? When can I wear casual pants versus full suit? Those sorts of things deeply troubled me because I didn't want to be out of place. I didn't want to be not the right fit in terms of this new undertaking. But adjusted and adapted and made the transition to non-uniformed sort of environments. What was also interesting was similar but very different cultures, very different capacities in organisational size. I learned a very valuable lesson that when you take on roles and you join up to an organisation, trying to understand its operational remit, trying to understand what it is actually charged to do and deliver, versus what might be the intentions of those that create it or those that lead it. So understanding your authorizing environment, I think, is really important. I found some of those adjustments quite challenging. I think also when I left government at the end of 22, given some changes in priorities and structures, I found myself looking at taking a break, and I took a break indeed. And my wife caught up on many years of no holidays, and we had a good time of travelling domestically and abroad. And for me, on reflection, I realised in so many ways how fatigued I was, how burnt out I was, particularly like so many others that had been working through and continued to work through those very challenging times. I was thinking this is pretty good, having breaks and relaxing and doing very casual consultancy and advisory services to private and government organisations. And I thought this is probably a pretty good transition to retirement. But then my wife reminded me of how young I was, and that I was getting in the way at home. And it was about time I looked for something more meaningful, something with purpose, and get out there. And she also said I wouldn't mind a few more holidays. So go away and earn some money. So then I really struggled for a while saying, well, what do I have to offer? What is my worth? Where on earth am I going to fit in, given my background, given my focus, and given my recent experience of transitioning into another area, and then finishing up with government. So I started looking at some of the most basic of elements. And it dawned on me that I actually hadn't applied for a job since 2007. And the iterations that occurred thereafter have either been lateral transfers or movements or holding a role for a considerable period of time. I didn't even know where to start with what's expected in a modern CV or resume. I started looking online, started reviewing and researching different aspects. And I ended up contacting a lady, a former colleague, who was very much involved in the private sector with recruiting, running a recruiting organisation, often doing many recruitments and appointments for government organisations. I'd sat on panels with her. I'd engaged her to do recruitment exercises for me. And I rang her and said, I need some help. I need some guidance on where do I start? What is it that's expected these days in putting together a CV? Do you need a social presence? All those sorts of things. And I valued and gained enormously from that contribution and that guidance. I had a number of meetings with different recruiters to look at what might be coming, but I was still struggling with the fit. I was still struggling with the purpose and the sense of belonging, and I knew that I missed the complexities and challenges of responsibilities, of accountabilities. But most importantly, I missed the connection with people, having teams and working with teams. I ended up connecting with a couple of organisations who asked if I'd be willing to provide consultancy services and setting up my own business and consulting back to them and whatever else might be available in the sector. I always told myself I didn't want to be a consultant because I thought it was a pretty lonely place when you're working on your own and you're interacting and connecting with clients. But I've been doing that now for a few years, and I can't complain about the variety of work and the income and all those sorts of things. It's actually very worthwhile, but it's different. It's proven to be quite challenging, and at a deep down level, I do miss that core team, those people challenges, those organisational complexities that come rather than the meaningful and purposeful engagement with clients, which is more transactional. So it's been a very interesting transition, and I reflect on my organisational experience, but also just my personal experience of the last few years, particularly coming out of an organisation, coming out of government organisations, exploring a different world, and realising that it's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to have a little anxiety about where to from here. But most importantly, it's okay to put your hand up and seek a guidance and assistance from experts and from colleagues. I think there's no doubt, as we've talked about many times over recent years, particularly through Wellbeing Australia forums and the like, is that in my experience, we should never underestimate the criticality of peer support, of peer structures that can help guide us and reassure us, and dare I say it, remind us of what our offering might be when we are struggling as individuals to understand what that might look like or what that might be. And I think it reminds me that it's the little things we do, maintaining contact, reaching out to one another, reaching out with messages, reaching out with phone calls, catching up and checking in, and seeing how people are going, and have conversations with them about what they're contemplating, what they might be interested in. Because I know just in my time in the last few years, not only have I benefited from it personally, but I've also been able to connect with colleagues that are making that transition and help them on the journey and help them realise that they've got a lot to offer. They've got a remarkable capacity. And outside of those constructs or those structures that they might have become accustomed to over an extended period of time, we can function and we can thrive, and we can get work-life balance and satisfaction in other ways than we have been traditionally used to. I'm happy to stop there and take any questions, Donna, if there might be any.
That's amazing, Shane. It's Catherine here. Don's
Right.
actually having some technical problems. Such amazing sharing. Isn't it interesting how it's the simple things we don't think about that have the biggest emotional weight in these changes. So when you were making those comments about, what do I wear, when, and those sorts of things, we don't even think about those sorts of things because we're so used to that uniform. How did you go about addressing that and just working your head through? Because it must have been something that was quite uncomfortable.
Oh, I think it nearly killed me. I think, actually, more particularly if I'm honest, I think it nearly killed my wife, because every day I'm saying, does this shirt go with this tie? Does this combination go with this jacket or this suit? But it is. I think it's the lack of familiarity. I think it's we all want to feel a sense of belonging, and I think majority of us want to contribute and want to make a difference in a positive way, and we want to fit in and not be the outlier or the disruptor. We don't get me wrong. I think we need those different perspectives and individuals in our workplace. That's what makes a healthy team. But most
Yeah.
of us just want to make sure we're meeting expectations, that we understand what's expected of us. And it was those little decisions that I found really quite challenging initially, and pitching the right weight of, where do you wear a tie, where do you not wear a tie, and all that
Yeah.
sort of, those little things do play on your mind, I must admit.
So true. And like you said, that sense of belonging, that sense of connection is exactly what's driving that. So that's what then gives me the confidence and the comfort to be the challenging disruptor, but it's constructive and it's positive. And we've got a number of other people who have commented here that, they've really struggled to keep connected and have felt a bit like a leper, or someone who just, what people often say to me is that I don't have my space anymore, right? So I used to have a really clear remit, and I knew exactly who I was and where I was and how I felt, but that has all shifted in that framework. So I think
Yeah,
it's that challenge of what drives us to succeed so well as a first responder and a veteran in that space of connection. That is our biggest challenge in that change. And I really thank you for your candid sharing and your honesty there, because I think it's calling out the elephant in the room that we don't know until we're doing it. And we all feel it's only us because we've never heard from others. So I think
yeah.
it's just absolutely, it's so true. And so grateful that you share so humbly, because it does give us that platform for everybody to feel exactly where they are. Did you
And
have any closing comments, Shane?
I would just say, I think the other thing that became apparent to me particularly when I spent time with the recruiting expert that I'd had some relationship with over the years. And when I talked to colleagues that were on similar journeys to myself over recent times, our sectors, and I use that plural because it varies, as individuals operating in those sectors, despite the standing, despite the public regard, despite the service incidents and events that we find ourselves dealing with quite routinely, when it comes to assessing self, we are generally quite reserved and humble.
Yeah.
We very much devalue what our skill sets are. We don't frame up and sell ourselves. We just accept that we're part of a team, we're part of an operation, we're part of an organization and an industry. And it's not, and the big fear is, I don't even know where to start. How do I frame all these qualifications and skills I've got, particularly when you're transitioning from industries like defense and others where they map a lot of internal training and competency to the national generic qualification frameworks? There's people that can help you do that. And many people simply undersell themselves because they genuinely take for granted what they've been doing and don't think much of it. But to the outside world, there's a huge offering and there's a huge capability inherent in those trainings, those skills, and those experiences that people have got out of the sector.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. It's that coming from a giving nature, right? I'm serving others, so I don't put myself first. I won't voice my strengths and my gifts and my talents. But as you say, and I've worked with a lot of people coming from a range of different agencies, moving into different agencies or public sector, into corporate, into all different spaces. And those skills are so valued. But that reflection time, and I always think it's good to do with a peer, a colleague, right? Have that cup of tea and go, so what is it? What is it that I bring to the table, and be able to build that confidence instead of going, I'll push it under the rug and pretend I don't have
And
any.
share experiences, share
Yeah.
the value we get out of people sharing insights, sharing experiences, sharing stories. It helps us normalize amongst each other because we harbor these dreads, we dread, we fear that we're just not meeting the mark, and we look to others and think they look like they're going all right, but they're just having the same conversations, the same thoughts, and the same worries that we are, and we don't know that until we have the conversation and we find
Exactly.
ourselves, I think, a little more normalized.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shana. We will be facilitating a self-assessment workshop during these couple of days ahead. So that is exactly what we found, is people aren't sure where to go. So we're going to help to facilitate that. So thank you, Shane, for all your words of wisdom and inspiration. I could spend hours talking to you. We always do. But also for starting this wonderful week to be able to help people really start, and I guess exactly what you've said, zone into themselves and value themselves from there. So
Thanks,
thank you to
Darren.
everyone who has joined. Pleasure, Shane. Thanks
Thanks,
to everyone who has joined. If everyone can take a second to share their feedback in the survey, that's always beneficial for us in our planning forward. And as I mentioned, please make sure that you're registered for those other sessions that we have this week. There's a morning and a noon session every single day to keep this conversation going. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.